The Chicago morning was sharp, the crisp autumn air that bit at your fingertips and made the city's skyline gleam like polished steel. Ava Brooks adjusted her scarf, her breath visible in the chilly dawn, as she climbed the steps of the Cook County Courthouse. Her dark skin glowed under the pale sunlight, contrasting with the muted grays of the stone building. At 32, Ava carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had fought for every inch of her place in the world. Her tightly coiled hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the crowd as she prepared for the day's work. Ava was an investigative journalist, one of the best at the Chicago Chronicle. Her reputation for uncovering truths buried under layers of corporate deceit had earned her both admiration and enemies. Today, she was here for the opening of a high-profile lawsuit against Pinnacle Properties, a real estate conglomerate, accused of predatory practices in Chicago's South Side. The case had the city buzzing. Activists, reporters, and curious onlookers crowded the courthouse steps, their voices a low hum of anticipation. Inside the courtroom was a cathedral of oak and marble, its high ceilings amplifying every whisper. Ava slipped into a seat near the front, her notepad on her knee, her pen poised like a weapon. She was here to observe, dissect, and find the story beneath the story. Pinnacle's legal team was a fortress of suits, but one figure stood out: Michael Reed, the lead attorney. Michael was a white American, his fair skin almost luminous under the courtroom's fluorescent lights. His tailored navy suit hugged his broad shoulders, and his dark hair was swept back, revealing a jawline that seemed carved from granite. At 40, he carried an air of effortless authority, his green eyes scanning the room with a predator's precision. Michael Reed was synonymous with power in Chicago's legal circles, a billionaire attorney who had never lost a case. His reputation preceded him, brilliant, ruthless, and untouchable. Ava's gaze locked on Michael as the judge called the court to order. He stood to address the court, his voice low and commanding, each word deliberate, like a chess move calculated 10 steps ahead. He was defending Pinnacle, arguing their practices were standard industry procedure, a phrase that made Ava's pen pause. She scribbled a note. Standard for whom? Her instincts told her there was more to this case, and to Michael Reed, than met the eye. The morning session unfolded with predictable legal sparring, but Ava's attention never wavered from Michael. There was something about him, a magnetic pull, that was both alluring and unsettling. His movements were controlled, his gestures precise, yet there was a hint of danger in how he dominated the room. When he cross-examined a witness, his questions were surgical, exposing inconsistencies with a calm that felt almost predatory. Ava jotted down another note. Cold. Calculating and hiding something. When the court recessed for lunch, Ava lingered in the hallway, her recorder tucked into her pocket. She approached a witness, a nervous property manager named Clara, who had testified about Pinnacle's tenant eviction policies. Ava's gentle questions were pointed, coaxing Clara into revealing more than she had on the stand. They didn't give us a choice, Clara whispered, glancing around. Pinnacle's orders came from the top: evict or face consequences. A shadow fell over them, and Ava turned to find Michael Reed standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable. His fair complexion seemed almost stark against the dark wool of his coat, and his eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. "I see you're making friends." Ava straightened her dark skin, warming slightly under his gaze. She wasn't intimidated, not yet, but something about how he said her name, like he'd already studied her, set her on edge. "Just doing my job." "Mr. Reed," she replied, her tone cool but firm. "The public deserves to know the truth." Michael's lips curved into a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Truth is a slippery thing, Ms. Brooks. Be careful where you chase it." He turned and walked away, leaving Ava with a mix of curiosity and unease. She watched his retreating figure, noting the confidence in his stride, the way people parted for him like water around a ship. Dangerous, she thought again, but undeniably compelling. Back at her desk in the Chronicle's newsroom, Ava couldn't shake the image of Michael Reed. She pulled up everything she could find on him: articles, court records, even a few society pages. Born into a working-class family in Chicago's suburbs, he'd clawed his way to the top of the legal world, building a fortune and a reputation. His pale skin and striking features had made him a favorite at charity galas. But there were whispers of ruthlessness. Clients who crossed him often ended up ruined. Ava's journalist instincts screamed that there was a story here, one bigger than Pinnacle Properties. That evening, Ava sat in her small apartment on the South Side, the city's lights glittering through her window. Her daughter Lila slept soundly in the next room, her soft breathing a reminder of why Ava pushed so hard. As a black woman in a field dominated by white men, Ava had faced every barrier imaginable: skepticism, condescension, outright hostility. But she'd never backed down. Now, with Michael Reed in her sights, she felt the familiar thrill of a hunt. Yet there was something else too, a spark of attraction she didn't want to admit. His cold charisma, sharp intellect, how he'd looked at her. It was a complication she didn't need. The next day, Ava returned to the courthouse, her dark skin glowing under the morning sun as she navigated the crowd. Michael was already there, conferring with his team, his fair complexion standing against the sea of suits. Their eyes met briefly, and Ava felt that same jolt, like a current running through her. She pushed it down, focusing on her notepad: questions and mission. Pinnacle Properties was hiding something, and Michael Reed was the key. But as she watched him move through the courtroom, commanding attention with every word, she couldn't help but wonder, was he the villain of this story, or something else entirely? Each day the trial dragged on, revealing more about Pinnacle's practices, but less about Michael himself. Ava dug deeper, interviewing tenants, combing through public records, and chasing leads that led to dead ends. She returned to her apartment every night exhausted, but driven, her dark fingers flying over her laptop as she pieced together the puzzle. Michael's name kept surfacing, not in the documents, but in her thoughts. His presence was a shadow she couldn't shake, a mix of menace and allure that kept her on edge. As the court adjourned, Ava found herself alone in the hallway with Michael one afternoon. He leaned against the wall, his fair skin catching the light, his eyes studying her with that same unnerving intensity. "You're relentless, Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice low. "Most people would have given up by now." Ava met his gaze, her dark eyes unflinching. "Most people don't have my reasons, Mr. Reed." She didn't elaborate, but the weight of her words hung between them. Her daughter, her community, her need to prove herself in a world that too often dismissed her. Michael's expression softened, just for a moment, before the mask of control slipped back into place. "Be careful, Ava," he said, using her first name for the first time. "You're playing a dangerous game." She watched him walk away, her heart pounding. Dangerous, yes. But Ava Brooks had never been one to back down from a challenge. And Michael Reed, with his pale skin and piercing eyes, was the most dangerous challenge she'd ever faced. The courthouse was a battlefield of words and egos, and Ava Brooks was in her element. She moved through the crowded hallways with purpose, her notepad clutched like a shield, her pen a sword. The Pinnacle Properties case had grown more contentious, with new witnesses and denser legal arguments piling up like storm clouds. Ava's focus was razor sharp, but she couldn't ignore the undercurrent pulling her toward Michael Reed. Today, the courtroom buzzed with tension. Michael was at the defense table, his navy suit pristine, his posture commanding, as he prepared to question a key witness, a city planner who claimed Pinnacle's developments had displaced hundreds of low-income families. Ava watched from her seat, her journalist's instincts honed on every detail, the way Michael's fingers tapped lightly on the table, the subtle shift in his expression as the witness took the stand. He was a study in control, but Ava sensed something beneath it, a flicker of something human unguarded. When Michael began his cross-examination, his voice was a blade cutting through the witness's testimony with precision. "You stated that Pinnacle's actions were unconscionable," he said, his tone calm but laced with challenge. "Can you provide specific evidence of intent, or is this your opinion?" The room seemed to hold its breath as the planner fumbled, unable to produce a concrete answer. Ava scribbled furiously, her pen capturing every word. But it wasn't just Michael's skill that held her attention. It was how he dominated the space, and his presence seemed to pull everyone into his orbit. She hated admitting it, but there was something magnetic about him, a pull she felt despite her better judgment. She'd been burned before years ago by a lawyer whose charm had masked betrayal. That betrayal cost her trust, confidence, and nearly her career. She wasn't about to let history repeat itself. Ava slipped into the hallway as the session broke for recess, determined to corner the city planner for a follow-up. She found him near a water fountain, his face flushed from Michael's grilling. "Thompson," she began, her voice steady but warm. "Can we talk about Pinnacle's eviction notices? Off the record if you prefer." Thompson hesitated, glancing around. "Look, Ms. Brooks, I've said what I can. Pinnacle's got powerful friends. You don't want to dig too deep." Before Ava could press further, a shadow loomed. Michael Reed stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable, but his eyes fixed on her. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice carrying that same smooth authority. "You're making a habit of these hallway interrogations." Ava turned, her posture defiant. "And you're making a habit of interrupting them, Mr. Reed. Should I be flattered by the attention?" A faint smile tugged at his lips, and for a moment, Ava saw something new, a spark of genuine amusement. "Flattered, maybe. But I'd wager you're more annoyed than anything." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're good at this, Ava. Too good, maybe." Using her first name sent a jolt through her, and she hated how it made her pulse quicken. "I'm just doing my job," she said, her tone firm, but eyes locked on his. "Something you might understand if you weren't so busy defending the indefensible." Michael's smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet intensity. "You think you know what's indefensible? Be careful, Ava. Not everything is as simple as it seems." He turned and walked away, leaving Ava standing there, her heart racing. She cursed herself for letting him get under her skin. Michael Reed was trouble-charming, brilliant, and dangerous. She'd learned the hard way, not to trust men like him, men who wielded power like a weapon. Yet something about him made her want to dig deeper to unravel the enigma behind the suit. Ava threw herself into her work at the Chronicle's newsroom, chasing leads on Pinnacle properties. She interviewed displaced tenants, sifted through property records, and called in favors from old contacts. All information pointed to a pattern of aggressive evictions, but the trail always stopped short of Michael himself. Was he the mastermind, or just a hired gun? The question gnawed at her, as did the memory of his voice, his gaze, the way he'd said her name. That evening, Ava sat in her apartment, the city's lights casting long shadows across her living room. Lila was at a sleepover, leaving the space too quiet, too empty. Ava poured herself a glass of wine and opened her laptop, pulling up a photo from a recent gala where Michael had been honored. He stood in a tuxedo, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp, as if he were sizing up the room. She stared at the image longer than intended, her mind replaying their encounters. There was an undeniable pull, but it was tangled with suspicion. She couldn't afford to let attraction cloud her judgment. The next morning, Ava returned to the courthouse, her resolve hardened. The trial was heating up with new evidence being presented, a whistleblower's affidavit claiming Pinnacle had falsified financial reports. Michael handled the revelation with his usual calm, deflecting questions with ease. But Ava noticed a tightness in his jaw, a flicker of strain. She made a note. He's hiding something. But what? During a break, she approached another witness, a former Pinnacle employee who seemed nervous but willing to talk. As Ava pressed for details, she felt a presence behind her. Michael again, his voice low and teasing. "You don't quit, do you?" Ava turned, her eyes narrowing. "Not when there's a story to tell. You should know that by now." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Maybe I do," he said softly. "But stories have a way of twisting, Ava. Make sure you're chasing the right one." The words lingered as he walked away, and Ava felt that same frustration and fascination. Michael Reed was a puzzle, one she was determined to solve. But as she watched him disappear into the crowd, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a game far bigger and far more dangerous than she'd imagined. The Chicago wind howled through the city, rattling the windows of Ava Brooks' small apartment on the South Side. She sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of documents, her laptop glowing in the dim light. The Pinnacle Properties case had consumed her for weeks, and every lead seemed to point to a labyrinth of corporate maneuvering. Ava's instincts told her the truth was buried deep, and she was determined to find it, even if it meant sleepless nights and endless coffee. Her notepad was filled with scribbled questions, most circling back to Michael Reed. His commanding presence in the courtroom, his sharp intellect, and how he seemed to anticipate her every move kept her on edge. She couldn't shake the memory of their last encounter in the courthouse hallway. His warning about chasing the wrong story. Was it a threat or a genuine caution? Either way, Ava wasn't one to back down. Tonight she was diving into a new lead. A tip from an anonymous source claiming Pinnacle had funneled money through shell companies to skirt taxes. The source had sent her a USB drive delivered in a plain envelope to the Chicago Chronicle's office. Ava plugged it into her laptop, her heart racing as files loaded. Spreadsheets, emails, and scanned contracts filled the screen, each more damning than the last. One document caught her eye, a memo signed by Pinnacle's CEO, referencing a consulting agreement with a firm called Horizon Ventures. The numbers didn't add up, millions in payments for vague services that smelled like a front. Ava cross-referenced Horizon Ventures with public records. The firm was registered in Delaware, a notorious haven for corporate secrecy, but one name stood out among its listed officers: Michael Reed. Her stomach dropped. Was he more than just Pinnacle's attorney? Was he orchestrating something illegal behind the scenes? The thought made her pulse quicken, a mix of excitement and dread. This could be the break she needed, or a dangerous misstep. She spent hours piecing together the connections, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The memo suggested Michael had brokered a deal to hide Pinnacle's profits, but the evidence was circumstantial. Ava needed more, something concrete to tie him to the scheme. She emailed a contact at the city's tax office, requesting records on Horizon Ventures, then leaned back, rubbing her temples. The weight of the discovery pressed on her, but so did the image of Michael's piercing gaze, his voice warning her to be careful. She hated how he lingered in her thoughts, a complication she couldn't afford. Ava returned to the courthouse the next morning, her mind buzzing with the new information. The trial was in full swing with Michael at the defense table, his navy suit impeccable as he conferred with his team. Ava watched him closely, searching for any sign of guilt. He moved with the same confidence, his voice steady, as he dismantled a witness's testimony about Pinnacle's tenant evictions. But now, Ava saw him differently, not just a lawyer, but a potential player in a larger game. During a recess, she slipped into the courthouse library, a quiet room lined with legal tomes. She needed to verify the USB's documents, But her search was interrupted when Michael appeared in the doorway. His presence filled the space, his eyes locking onto hers with that familiar intensity. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his tone light but edged with something sharper. "You're spending a lot of time in places you don't belong." Ava straightened her notepad clutched tightly. "Just doing my job, Mr. Reed. You seem awfully interested in where I spend my time." He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "I'm curious about what you're chasing. You've got that look like you've found something essential." Her heart skipped a beat. Did he know about the USB? She forced a neutral expression, unwilling to give anything away. "I'm always chasing something, Michael. That's what journalists do." He studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Be careful what you find, Ava. Some truths come with a cost." The words hung in the air as he turned and left, leaving Ava with a chill that had nothing to do with the courthouse's drafty halls. She couldn't tell if he was warning her off or testing her resolve, but she was more determined than ever. Back at her desk, she dug deeper into Horizon Ventures, uncovering a web of transactions that linked the firm to Pinnacle's offshore accounts. The evidence was mounting, but it still wasn't enough to prove Michael's involvement beyond a doubt. That night, Ava met with a source, a former Pinnacle accountant named Sarah, who agreed to talk off the record. They sat in a dimly lit diner, the smell of greasy fries mingling with the tension in the air. Sarah's hands trembled as she slid a folder across the table. "This is all I could get," she whispered. "Pinnacle's been cooking the books for years. Horizon was their way of hiding it. And Reed, he was the one who set it up." Ava's heart pounded as she opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, emails, and a contract bearing Michael's signature. It was the smoking gun she'd been searching for, but it came with a price. Michael's career would be destroyed if she published this, and Pinnacle's empire would crumble. But what if she was wrong? What if there was more to the story? The doubt gnawed at her, amplified by her strange pull toward Michael despite everything. She spent the next few days verifying the documents, cross-checking every detail. The evidence was solid, but Ava couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something. Michael's warnings echoed in her mind, and she wondered if he was trying to protect himself or her. The thought was absurd, given the evidence, but it lingered like a shadow. At the courthouse, Ava kept her distance, observing Michael from afar. He was as commanding as ever, but she noticed subtle signs of strain. A clenched jaw, a fleeting glance her way. Was he worried about what she'd found? Or was there something else at play? The questions piled up, and Ava felt the weight of her decision pressing down. Publishing the story would be a coup for her career, but it could also ruin an innocent man or expose a guilty one. As she left the courthouse one evening, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Drop the story, or you'll regret it." Ava's blood ran cold. She looked around, and the Chicago streets suddenly felt hostile, the shadows deeper than before. Someone knew what she was working on, and they didn't want it to see the light of day. Ava felt a flicker of fear for the first time, not just for herself, but for Lila, her daughter, who was the center of her world. She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, her mind racing. The evidence pointed to Michael, but her gut told her there was more to the story. Was he the mastermind or a pawn in a larger scheme? And who was threatening her? Ava knew one thing: she was too deep to turn back now. The truth was out there. She would find it no matter the cost. The Chicago Chronicle's newsroom was a hive of activity, phones ringing and keyboards clacking as deadlines loomed. Ava Brooks sat at her desk, surrounded by notes and printouts, her mind still reeling from the threatening text she'd received. The words, "Drop the story, or you'll regret it," had kept her awake all night, her thoughts torn between fear and determination. She hadn't told anyone about the message, but it fueled her resolve to uncover the truth about Pinnacle Properties and Michael Reed. Her investigation had taken a darker turn since finding the Horizon Ventures documents. The evidence suggested Michael was involved in a scheme to hide Pinnacle's profits, but Ava couldn't shake the feeling that she was being led down a carefully constructed path. The anonymous text only deepened her suspicion. Someone was watching her, and they wanted her to stop digging. But Ava Brooks didn't stop, not when she was this close. A shadow fell across her desk as she sifted through the latest batch of emails from her source. She looked up to see a man she didn't recognize, his suit sharp, but his smile sharper. "Ava Brooks," he asked, his voice smooth but carrying an edge. "I'm Derek Larson. I used to work with Michael Reed." Ava's guard went up immediately. She'd heard of Derek, a former partner at Michael's law firm who had left under murky circumstances. The legal world whispered about their falling out, a clash of egos that had turned them into bitter rivals. Derek extended a hand, but Ava didn't take it, leaning back in her chair instead. "What do you want?" "Mr. Larson." Derek's smile didn't falter. "I've been following your work on the Pinnacle case. Impressive stuff. I thought you might want some perspective on Michael Reed." Ava's eyes narrowed. Perspective or an agenda? He chuckled, pulling up a chair without asking. "Fair enough. Let's say I know things about Michael that might interest you. Things the public doesn't see." Ava's instincts screamed caution, but she couldn't deny the opportunity. If Derek had dirt on Michael, it could confirm or complicate her suspicions. "I'm listening," she said, her tone neutral. Derek leaned in, lowering his voice. "Michael's not just Pinnacle's lawyer. He's their fixer. Those shell companies you're sniffing around, Horizon Ventures, that's his handiwork. He's been moving money for years, keeping Pinnacle's hands clean while they bleed the city dry." Ava's heart raced, but she kept her expression steady. "That's a big claim. Got any proof?" Derek slid a manila envelope across her desk. "Take a look. Emails, bank records, and even a memo with Michael's signature. It's all there." She opened the envelope, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. The documents looked authentic too, authentic almost. Emails between Michael and Pinnacle's CEO, transfer records from Horizon Ventures, and a memo outlining a consulting deal worth millions. It was exactly what she needed to nail Michael. But something felt off. The evidence was too clean, too perfectly aligned with her suspicions. "Why are you giving me this?" she asked, her eyes locking onto Derek's. "What's in it for you?" Derek shrugged, his smile turning colder. "Let's say I don't like seeing Michael win. He's had it too good for too long. Someone needs to knock him down a peg." Ava didn't trust him for a second, but she couldn't ignore the documents. She curtly thanked him and sent him on his way, her mind racing. She spread the papers across her table at her apartment, comparing them to the USB files. The similarities were striking, but so were the differences. Derek's documents were polished, almost theatrical, while the USB files had a raw, unfiltered quality. Was Derek feeding her the truth, or a carefully crafted lie? Ava returned to the courthouse the next day, her thoughts a tangle of doubt and determination. Michael was in his element, dismantling a witness with his usual precision. But Ava couldn't focus on the trial. Derek's words echoed in her head, and the envelope burned a hole in her bag. She needed to confront Michael, but not until she was sure. During a recess, she found herself in the hallway, pacing near the vending machines. Derek appeared again, as if summoned by her thoughts, and thought about my offer. He asked, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. "I'm still looking into it," Ava said. Her voice clipped. "I don't publish anything without verification." Derek's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Smart. But don't wait too long, Ava. The truth can slip away if you don't grab it." He left before she could respond, and Ava felt a chill settle over her. Derek was playing a game, but she wasn't sure of the rules or the stakes. She spent the rest of the day digging into his background, uncovering a trail of lawsuits and disgruntled clients. Derek Larson was no saint, and his vendetta against Michael was personal. But that didn't mean he was wrong. That night, Ava sat with Lila, helping her with homework to ground herself in something normal. But her mind drifted to the documents Michael and Derek's sly grin. She tucked Lila into bed, then returned to her laptop, pulling up the Chronicle's archives. A search for Derek's name revealed an old article about his departure from Michael's firm, hinting at a dispute over a major client. The details were vague, but the bad blood was clear. As she worked, her phone buzzed again, an email from her tax office contact. The records confirmed Horizon Ventures' ties to Pinnacle, but they also revealed something new. A second firm, Eclipse Holdings, with Derek's name attached. Ava's breath caught. Was Derek playing both sides, setting her up to take down Michael while covering his tracks? The possibility sent her spiraling, her trust in the evidence eroding. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The threat from the unknown number, Derek's sudden appearance, and the two perfect documents all felt orchestrated. Ava was a journalist, not a detective, but she knew a trap when she smelled one. The question was, who was setting it, Michael with his cryptic warnings and commanding presence, or Derek with his slick charm and convenient evidence? Ava didn't know, but she was determined to find out before the shadows closed in around her. The Chicago skyline glittered through the Chicago Chronicle's newsroom windows, but Ava Brooks barely noticed. Her desk was a fortress of papers, coffee cups, and post-it notes, each scribbled with fragments of her investigation into Pinnacle Properties. The documents from Derek Larson and the anonymous USB drive had consumed her for days, their implications pointing to Michael Reed as the architect of a massive financial cover-up. The pressure to publish was mounting. Her editor Carla had been pushing for a bombshell to boost the paper's circulation, but Ava's instincts screamed caution. The evidence was compelling, but something about it felt too neat, too convenient. Still, the weight of Derek's documents combined with the anonymous tip was hard to ignore. Emails, bank records, and a memo bearing Michael's signature painted a damning picture. Pinnacle Properties had funneled millions through Horizon Ventures, a shell company allegedly set up by Michael to hide profits and evade taxes. The story was explosive, the kind that could make Ava's career. But it also meant destroying Michael's reputation, a prospect that stirred a confusing mix of determination and unease. His cryptic warnings, his intense gaze, the way he seemed to see through her, lingered, making her question what she was about to do. Ava leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. The newsroom was quiet, and most of her colleagues were gone for the night. She opened her laptop and began drafting the article, her fingers hesitant. The headline came easily: Pinnacle Properties' Hidden Empire, a Web of Deception. She laid out the evidence, methodically detailing Horizon Ventures' transactions, Pinnacle's aggressive evictions, and Michael's alleged role as the mastermind. Each sentence felt like a step toward a precipice, but Ava pressed on, driven by her duty to the truth and the memory of that threatening text: drop the story, or you'll regret it. By midnight, the draft was complete. She sent it to Carla, her stomach churning. This was it, no turning back. The next morning, Carla called her into her office, her eyes gleaming excitedly. "This is dynamite, Ava," she said, holding up the printed draft. "We're running it on the front page tomorrow. You sure you're ready for the fallout?" Ava nodded, though her chest tightened. "It's solid. I've checked everything twice." Carla leaned forward, her voice softening. "I know you have. But this is Michael Reed we're talking about. He's got friends in high places. Be ready for pushback." Ava left the office, her mind racing. She hadn't seen Michael since their last encounter in the courthouse library, but she could imagine his reaction. those piercing eyes turning cold, his calm demeanor cracking. The thought made her uneasy, not just because of the professional consequences, but because of the strange pull she felt toward him, despite everything. The article hit the stands the next day, and Chicago erupted. Social media buzzed with reactions from outrage at Pinnacle's practices to speculation about Michael's involvement. The Chronicle's website crashed due to traffic, and Ava's inbox was filled with interview requests and angry emails from Pinnacle's supporters. By noon, she was the talk of the city, her name attached to a story that could redefine her career. But the victory felt hollow. Ava watched from the gallery at the courthouse as Michael entered, his posture as commanding as ever, but his expression darker and more guarded. He didn't look her way, but she felt the weight of his presence like a storm cloud hovering. When the session broke for recess, he made his way toward her, his movements deliberate. The hallway cleared, as if sensing the tension leaving them alone. "Ava," he said, his voice low, controlled, but laced with something raw. "You didn't even give me a chance to explain." Her heart pounded, but she held his gaze. "I followed the evidence, Michael. It's my job. Your job." His eyes flashed with anger, the first crack in his usual composure. "You've just accused me of fraud, of corruption, without a shred of proof that holds up. Do those documents tell the whole story? You're smarter than that." Ava's resolve wavered, but she stood her ground. "The documents don't lie. Your signature was on them. Horizon Ventures, the transfers, the memo. It's all there." Michael stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "And you didn't stop to think someone might want you to find those. Someone who benefits from me going down." The implication hit her like a punch. Derek. But Michael turned and walked away before she could respond, leaving her with a sinking feeling. Had she been played? The document seemed airtight, but Michael's words echoed her doubts. She needed to dig deeper and retrace her steps, but the damage was done. The city saw Michael as a villain, and Ava had put him there. Back at the Chronicle, Ava tried to focus, but the weight of the article's fallout pressed on her. Her phone buzzed with notifications, praise from readers, threats from anonymous accounts, and a call from her mother, worried about the attention. Ava reassured her, but her thoughts kept drifting to Michael. His anger had been palpable, but so had something else hurt. Betrayal. It gnawed at her, the idea that she might have misjudged him. That evening, Ava sat in her apartment, Lila curled beside her watching a cartoon. The normalcy of the moment grounded her, but her mind was elsewhere. She opened her laptop, pulling up the documents again, searching for anything she might have missed. The emails, bank records, and memo all pointed to Michael, but the perfection of it all was starting to feel like a setup. She needed to talk to Derek again to confront him, but first, she needed to protect herself. Another hadn't followed the threatening text, but lingered like a shadow. As she tucked Lila into bed, Ava's phone buzzed again. She froze, expecting another threat, but it was a message from an unknown number. "Check your sources, Ms. Brooks. Not everyone is who they seem." Her blood ran cold. Was this Michael warning her again, or someone else entirely? Ava didn't know. But one thing was clear. The story she'd published had set something in motion, and there was no going back. The Chicago night was heavy with rain, the streets slick and reflective under the city's lights. Ava Brooks sat in her car outside her apartment, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she stared at her phone. The message from the unknown number, "Check your sources, Ms. Brooks. Not everyone is who they seem," had arrived just after she'd put Lila to bed, and it sent a chill through her. The earlier threat, "Drop the story or you'll regret it," had been vague but menacing. This one felt personal, like someone was watching her every move. Ava's article accusing Michael Reed of orchestrating Pinnacle Properties' financial schemes had turned Chicago upside down. The Chicago Chronicle was selling out. Her name was trending online, and the courthouse was a circus of reporters and protesters. But the victory was tainted by doubt. Michael's words in the hallway, his accusation that she'd been fed a narrative, had planted a seed of uncertainty. Was Derek Larson, the former colleague who'd handed her the damning documents, playing her, or was Michael deflecting to save himself? She drove to the Chronicle's office, the rain hammering her windshield. The newsroom was deserted, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound. Ava spread Derek's documents across her desk, comparing them to the USB files from her anonymous source. The similarities were striking, but so were the differences. Derek's evidence was polished, almost scripted, while the USB files had a chaotic authenticity. She opened her laptop and began tracing the email addresses in Derek's documents, hoping to find a crack in the facade. Her phone buzzed again, and Ava's heart jumped. Another text from an unknown number. "Leave it alone, or Lila pays the price." The words hit like a physical blow. Her daughter's name, a violation that turned her fear into fury. She dialed her mother, who was watching Lila for the night, her voice shaking as she confirmed her daughter was safe asleep in her grandmother's apartment. Ava hung up her hands, trembling. This wasn't just about her anymore. Someone was willing to threaten her child to silence her. She needed answers, and she needed them now. Ava pulled up everything she could find on Derek Larson. His history with Michael was murky, a partnership that had ended in a public feud with Derek, leaving their firm under suspicion. She found an old article mentioning a lawsuit against Derek for mismanaging client funds, but the case had been settled out of court. Digging deeper, she discovered a connection to Eclipse Holdings, a second shell company tied to Pinnacle. Derek's name appeared in the incorporation papers, a detail he'd conveniently omitted. The pieces were starting to fit, but Ava needed more. She emailed her tax office contact requesting records on Eclipse Holdings, then called a private investigator she'd worked with before, asking him to tail Derek. If he were setting her up, she'd find out. But the threats were escalating, and Ava couldn't shake the image of Lila's face, innocent and unaware of the danger her mother's work had brought. Ava returned to the courthouse the next day, her eyes scanning the crowd for Derek or anyone suspicious. Michael was there, commanding as ever, but he avoided her gaze. The trial was heating up with new witnesses, testifying about Pinnacle's predatory practices. Ava took notes, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the threats, the documents, Michael's words. She needed to confront him to see if he'd slip, but the risk was high. If he was behind, the threats approaching him could make things worse. During a recess, Ava lingered in the hallway, hoping to catch Michael alone. Instead, Derek appeared, his smile as slick as the rain-soaked streets. "Heard your article's making waves," he said, leaning against the wall. "You're welcome, by the way." Ava's eyes narrowed. "For what?" "Handing me a story that might be a lie." Derek's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "You're too smart to fall for Michael's act, Ava. He's playing the victim, but he's the one pulling the strings. Keep digging, you'll see." She stepped closer, her voice low and sharp. "And what about you, Derek? What's your game? Because I'm starting to think you're not just here to help me." He chuckled, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Paranoid, are we? Just watch your back, Ava. Chicago's a dangerous place for truth-tellers." He walked away, leaving Ava with a sinking feeling. She needed to protect Lila, uncover the truth, and figure out who was pulling the strings, Michael, Derek, or someone else entirely. Back at her apartment, she installed a new security system, her hands shaking as she set the code. Lila was staying with her mother until Ava could ensure her safety, a decision that broke her heart, but felt necessary. That night, Ava sat alone, the city's lights casting long shadows across her living room. She opened her laptop and pulled up the latest email from her tax office contact. The records on Eclipse Holdings confirmed Derek's involvement, but they also hinted at a deeper network, names and companies she hadn't seen before tied to Chicago's underbelly. The threats, the documents, and the rivalry between Michael and Derek were all connected, and Ava was caught in the middle. As she closed her laptop, her phone buzzed again. She braced herself, expecting another threat, but it was a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. The voice was distorted, mechanical. "You're getting close, Ms. Brooks. Too close. Stop now or you'll lose everything." Ava's blood ran cold, but her resolve hardened. Someone was desperate to keep their secrets buried, and she would find out who before the shadows consumed her and everyone she loved. The Chicago skyline shimmered through the rain-streaked windows of Ava Brooks's apartment, but the city's beauty felt distant, overshadowed by the fear that had taken root in her life. The threatening messages, "Drop the story," or "Lila pays the price," echoed in her mind, each word a dagger aimed at her daughter. Ava had sent Lila to stay with her mother on the other side of the city, a precaution that left her heart heavy, but her resolve unbroken. She was a journalist, not a quitter, and someone was trying to scare her into silence. She wouldn't let them win. Her investigation into Pinnacle Properties had spiraled into something far more dangerous than she'd anticipated. The documents from Derek Larson, accusing Michael Reed of orchestrating a financial scheme through Horizon Ventures, had fueled her explosive article, but doubts gnawed at her. Derek's evidence was too polished, and the anonymous USB files hinted at a broader conspiracy. The latest revelation that Derek was linked to another shell company, Eclipse Holdings, suggested he might be playing her, using her to destroy Michael while hiding his sins. Ava sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open to a spreadsheet tracking Pinnacle's transactions. The numbers blurred as her thoughts drifted to Michael. His anger in the courthouse hallway and the raw hurt in his voice when he'd accused her of not giving him a chance to explain haunted her. Was he a mastermind or a scapegoat? The question drove her to keep digging even as the threats escalated. Unbeknownst to Ava, Michael Reed was grappling with his own turmoil. The article had shaken his world, tarnishing his reputation and putting his career on the line. He sat in his sleek downtown office, the city's lights reflecting off the glass walls, his jaw tight as he read the latest headlines. Ava's words had cut deeper than he'd expected, not just because of the accusations, but because he'd seen something in her fire intelligence, a relentless pursuit of truth that he admired. Her betrayal stung, but he couldn't shake the instinct to protect her. Michael had built his sources and connections over the years in Chicago's cutthroat legal world. He'd heard whispers about the threats against Ava, and his gut told him they weren't random. Derek Larson, his former partner, and now bitter rival, was a likely suspect. Michael had never trusted Derek, whose ambition had always outstripped his ethics. When they'd parted ways, Derek had vowed revenge, and now with Ava's article tearing into Michael's life, it seemed Derek was making good on that promise. Michael called a private security firm he'd used before, without telling anyone. "I need someone to watch," he said, his voice low. Ava Brooks, journalist at the Chicago Chronicle. Discreetly. Make sure she and her daughter are safe. He didn't explain why it wasn't their business, but as he hung up, he felt relief tempered by the knowledge that Ava would hate him if she found out. Ava returned to the courthouse the next day, her eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of danger. The Pinnacle trial reached a fever pitch with new evidence against the company. Michael was at the defense table, his presence as commanding as ever, but Ava noticed a subtle tension in his posture, a flicker of distraction in his eyes. She wondered if it was the article or something else. During a recess, she slipped into a quiet corner of the courthouse, pulling out her phone to check messages from her private investigator. He'd been tailing Derek and had sent a report Derek had been seen meeting with a known figure in Chicago's underworld, a man named Victor Kane, linked to organized crime. Ava's heart raced. Was Derek working with criminals to silence her? The thought made her stomach churn, but it also fueled her determination. She was so focused on the report that she didn't notice Michael approaching until he stood beside her. "Ava," he said, his voice low, almost gentle. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the city." She flinched, tucking her phone away. "Just doing my job, Michael. You should try it sometime without the secrets." His jaw tightened, but his eyes held something softer, almost pained. "You think I'm the enemy here, but you're wrong. I'm not the one you should be afraid of." Ava's pulse quickened. "Then who should I be afraid of? Because someone's threatening my daughter, and I'm starting to think it's all connected to you." Michael's expression darkened, and for a moment she thought he might walk away. Instead, he stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not the one sending threats, Ava, but I know who might be. Stay away from Derek Larson. He's not what he seems." Before she could respond, he turned and left, leaving Ava with more questions than answers. She wanted to believe him, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Yet his warning about Derek aligned with her suspicions, and the coincidence was too stark to ignore. That evening, Ava's investigators sent another update. Derek had been spotted at a warehouse on the city's west side, a known hub for illegal activity. Ava's instincts screamed to go there and catch Derek in the act, but the thought of Lila stopped her. She couldn't take reckless risks, not now. Instead, she called her mother, confirming Lila was safe, then double-checked her apartment's new security system. The weight of fear was suffocating, but Ava refused to let it paralyze her. Unbeknownst to her, Michael's security team was already in place, watching her building from an unmarked car across the street. One of the guards, a grizzled veteran named Tom, had been briefed on the situation. Protect Ava and her daughter, no questions asked. Tom's team had picked up on suspicious activity, a black SUV circling Ava's block, too often its plates obscured. They reported it to Michael, who felt a surge of anger. Derek was behind this. He was sure of it, and wouldn't let Ava pay the price for his rival's vendetta. The next morning, Ava woke to a new email from her tax office contact. The records on Eclipse Holdings were more damning than she'd expected. Not only was Derek linked to the company, but it had ties to Victor Kane's operations. The puzzle was coming together, and Ava felt a spark of hope. If she could prove Derek was manipulating her, she could clear Michael's name, or at least expose the truth. But the threats loomed large, and every step felt like walking on a tightrope. Ava watched Michael from a distance at the courthouse, her mind torn between suspicion and a growing sense that he wasn't her enemy. He caught her eye, once his expression unreadable, and she wondered what he was hiding. Was he protecting her as his warning suggested, or covering his own tracks? The truth was out there, and Ava was determined to find it, even if it meant confronting the shadows head-on. The rain had stopped, leaving Chicago's streets slick and reflective under the sodium glow of streetlights. Ava Brooks sat in her car outside the Chicago Chronicle's office, her hands trembling as she clutched a printout of the latest evidence. Her investigation had taken a dark turn, and the pieces finally fell into place. Derek Larson, the man who'd handed her the documents accusing Michael Reed, was neck-deep in his own conspiracy. The records from her tax office contact confirmed that Eclipse Holdings, Derek's shell company, was tied to Victor Kane, a known figure in Chicago's criminal underworld. The documents she'd used to write her article, the ones that had ruined Michael's reputation, were starting to look like a carefully crafted lie. Ava's heart pounded as she replayed her last conversation with Michael. His warning about Derek, delivered with quiet intensity, had shaken her. She'd been so sure of the evidence, so confident Michael was the villain, that she hadn't questioned Derek's motives. Now, the anonymous threats against Lila, the polished perfection of Derek's documents, and the connection to Kane all pointed to one conclusion: she'd been played. The realization hit like a tidal wave, bringing a flood of guilt. Her article had branded Michael a criminal, and if she was wrong, she'd destroyed an innocent man's life. She drove to her mother's apartment, needing to see Lila to ground herself in the one thing that mattered most. Her daughter was asleep, curled up in a blanket, oblivious to the storm her mother was navigating. Ava kissed her forehead, whispering a promise to keep her safe, then returned to her car, her mind racing. She needed to confront Derek and expose his lies. But first, she had to face Michael. She owed him that much. Ava arrived at the courthouse early the next morning, her stomach knotted with dread. The Pinnacle trial was full swing, but her focus was on Michael. She found him in a quiet hallway, reviewing notes with his team. When he saw her, his expression hardened, but he dismissed his colleagues with a nod, leaving them alone. "Ava," he said, his voice cold but controlled. "Come to finish what you started." She took a deep breath, her hands clenched at her sides. "I need to talk to you, Michael. Alone." He studied her momentarily, then gestured to a nearby conference room. Inside, the air was heavy with tension. Ava closed the door, her heart pounding. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. "The documents I used for the article came from Derek. I think they were fake." Michael's eyes narrowed, but he didn't interrupt. Ava continued laying out everything: the USB files, Derek's involvement with Eclipse Holdings, the connection to Victor Kane, the threats against Lila. As she spoke, she saw something shift in Michael's expression, anger giving way to a flicker of understanding. "You think Derek set me up?" he asked, his voice low. "I don't know," Ava admitted, "but the evidence doesn't add up anymore. The documents he gave me were too perfect, and now I'm getting threats to back off. I need to know the truth, Michael. If you're involved, please tell me. If you're not, help me figure out who's behind this." For a moment, Michael was silent, his gaze intense. Then he leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not your enemy, Ava. I never was. Derek's been gunning for me since we split. He's using you to take me down, and working with people who don't play by the rules." Ava's chest tightened. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me," he said, a hint of bitterness in his tone. "You had your story, your evidence. You saw me as the villain. But I'm not the one threatening your daughter." The mention of Lila hit hard, and Ava's voice trembled. "Someone mentioned her by name, Michael. They said she'd pay if I didn't stop. I can't lose her." Michael's expression softened, and Ava saw something raw in his eyes for the first time. Empathy, maybe even guilt. "I know what it's like to lose someone," he said quietly. "I won't let that happen to you or Lila. But you need to trust me. Trust." The word hung between them, heavy with impossibility. Ava wanted to believe him, but the stakes were too high. "I don't know if I can," she said, "but I'll find the truth with or without you." She left the room, her mind a storm of guilt and determination. Back at the Chronicle, she dove into the documents again, focusing on Eclipse Holdings. The more she dug, the clearer it became. Derek had fabricated the evidence against Michael, using Ava to do his dirty work. The USB files, which she'd initially dismissed as less polished, were the real key. They showed a broader network of corruption with Derek at its center. Ava's investigator sent another update. Derek had been spotted meeting Kane again at a bar known for shady deals. She wanted to confront him, but the threat stopped her. Instead, she sent her investigator, instructing him to gather proof: photos, recordings, anything that could tie Derek to Kane. That night, Ava sat alone in her apartment, the silence oppressive. She opened her laptop, drafting a retraction for the Chronicle. It was a risk admitting her mistake, could tank her credibility, but she couldn't let the lie stand. As she typed, her phone buzzed with a new message. "You were warned. Keep going, and Lila's next." Attached was a photo of Lila's school playground taken that day. Ava's heart stopped. She called her mother, confirming Lila was safe, then contacted the police, her voice shaking as she reported the threat. They promised to increase patrols around her mother's apartment, but it wasn't enough. Ava was drowning in fear and guilt, her mistake with the article now a weapon against her daughter. She didn't know that Michael's security team had intercepted the same photo, which had been sent to them by an anonymous source. While working late in his office, Michael got a call from Tom, his lead guard. "We've got eyes on Ava's kid," Tom said. "She's safe, but someone's watching her. Looks like Kane's crew." Michael's blood ran cold. He didn't know Ava well, but he knew what it was like to lose everything. He made another call, this time to a contact in the district attorney's office, passing along what he knew about Derek and Kane. Exposing his connections was a risk, but he couldn't let Ava face this alone. As Ava sat in the dark, clutching her phone, she made a decision. She would confront Derek, expose his lies, and protect Lila, no matter the cost. But first, she needed to face Michael again, to see if he was truly an ally, or another player in Chicago's dangerous game. The truth was out there, and Ava was ready to fight for it, even if it meant walking deeper into the shadows. The Chicago morning was gray, the sky heavy with clouds that mirrored the weight in Ava Brooks's chest. She stood outside the Cook County Courthouse, her breath visible in the chilly air, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The past few days had been a whirlwind of fear and revelation. The threatening messages targeting her daughter Lila had pushed Ava to the edge. Still, the discovery that Derek Larson had manipulated her into publishing a false article against Michael Reed had ignited a fire. She'd been played, and the guilt was suffocating. Today she would face Michael, confess her mistake, and hope he could help her unravel the truth before the shadows closed. Inside the courthouse, the Pinnacle Properties trial buzzed with tension, but Ava's focus was on Michael. She spotted him at the defense table, his navy suit sharp, his posture commanding, despite the storm her article had unleashed. The accusations of fraud and corruption had damaged his reputation, and the press swarmed like vultures eager for more. Ava's heart sank as she watched him, knowing she'd contributed to his fall. But Derek's deception and the threats against Lila meant she couldn't stay silent. During a recess, Ava waited in a quiet hallway, her hands clenched to stop their trembling. When Michael emerged alone, his eyes met hers, and she saw a flicker of something: anger, hurt, maybe even hope. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "Michael, we need to talk. Now." He hesitated, then nodded, leading her to a small conference room. The door clicked shut, sealing them in a space thick with unspoken tension. Ava took a deep breath, her words spilling out before she could lose her nerve. "I was wrong about you. The article, those documents from Derek, they were fake. He set you up and I fell for it. I'm sorry." Michael's expression was unreadable, his eyes searching hers. "Sorry, that doesn't undo the damage, Ava. My name's been dragged through the mud. Clients are pulling out. You have no idea what this has cost me." "I know," she said, her voice breaking, "and I hate myself for it. But I'm trying to fix it. Derek's tied to Eclipse Holdings, to Victor Kane, to people who are threatening my daughter. I need to know what you know, Michael. If you're hiding anything, please tell me now." For a long moment he was silent, his jaw tight. Then he leaned back, running a hand through his hair, a rare crack in his controlled facade. "I'm not hiding what you think," he said quietly. "But I've been digging too. Derek's been after me since we parted ways. He's working with Kane to take down Pinnacle and me, Because I blocked a deal he wanted years ago. It was dirty, Ava. I wouldn't play along and he's never forgiven me. Ava's breath caught. So, the Horizon Ventures documents. Forged. Michael said, his voice hard. I consulted for Pinnacle, but I didn't set up any shell companies. Derek used my name, doctored the papers, and fed them to you. He knew you'd run with it. The truth hit her like a wave, washing away the last of her doubts about Michael. But it also deepened her fear. Derek wasn't just a rival lawyer. He was dangerous, connected to men who wouldn't hesitate to hurt her or Lila. He's threatening my daughter, she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. They sent a photo of her school. They know where she is. Michael's eyes darkened, and Ava saw something raw in him, for the first time, anger, but also something deeper, something protective. I know, he said softly. I've had people watching you, Ava. Not to spy, to keep you safe. I heard about the threats. She froze, torn between gratitude and unease. You've been watching me. Not like that, he said quickly. I hired a security team. After reading your article, I heard rumors that Kane's crew was targeting you. I couldn't let that happen. Ava's chest tightened. Even after she'd betrayed him, the idea of Michael protecting her stirred something she wasn't ready to name. But there was no time for emotions, not now. Why didn't you tell me, she asked. Because you wouldn't have trusted me, he said, his voice low. You still don't, not completely. But I'm telling you now, Ava, I'm on your side, and I won't let Derek or Kane hurt you or your daughter. The sincerity in his voice broke through her defenses, and for a moment she let herself believe him. But then she remembered Lila, the threats, the stakes. I need to stop Derek, she said. I have tangible evidence tying him to Kane and Eclipse Holdings, but I can't do this alone. Michael leaned forward, his eyes intense. You're not alone, but you need to be careful. Kane's not just a thug, he's connected, and he doesn't play games. Let me help you. Ava hesitated, her instinct to go it alone, warring with the reality of her situation. She'd been burned before trusting the wrong person, but Michael's willingness to protect her, even after everything shifted, something inside her. Okay, she said finally. But no secrets, Michael. If we're doing this, I need the truth, all of it. He nodded, and Ava saw a crack in his armor, for the first time a glimpse of vulnerability. No secrets, he said, but there's something you need to know about me. Years ago, I lost someone, a sister, to a case that went wrong. I trusted the bad people and she paid the price. I won't let that happen again. Ava, not to you or Lila. The confession hit her hard, his pain echoing her own fear for her daughter. She reached out almost instinctively, her hand brushing his. I'm sorry, she said softly. And thank you for watching out for us. Their eyes met, and the world outside the room faded for a moment. The tension between them wasn't just about the case anymore. It was personal, raw, and undeniable. But Ava pulled back her focus, snapping to the task at hand. We need a plan, she said. Derek's not going to stop, and neither will Kane. Michael nodded, his composure returning. I've got a contact in the DA's office. They're already looking into Kane. We can take Derek down if we get your evidence from them. But we need to move fast before he realizes you're on to him. They spent the next hour strategizing, mapping out how to verify Ava's evidence and get it to the right people without tipping off Derek. As they parted ways, Michael's hand lingered on her arm, a silent promise of support. Ava felt a spark, but she pushed it aside. There was no room for distractions, not when Lila's safety was on the line. Back at the Chronicle, Ava worked late compiling a dossier on Derek and Kane. Her investigator had sent photos of their latest meeting and a recording of Derek discussing cleaning up loose ends. The evidence was damning, but Ava knew it wouldn't be enough without Michael's help. As she typed, her phone buzzed, a new message from the unknown number. Last chance, Ms. Brooks. Walk away, or Lila's gone. Her blood ran cold, but she forwarded the message to Michael's security team, her resolve hardening. Derek had underestimated her, and he was about to learn what happened when you threatened Ava Brooks's daughter. The Chicago night was alive with the hum of the city, but Ava Brooks felt like she was walking through a battlefield. The threats against Lila had escalated, each message more chilling than the last. The latest, a grainy photo of Lila's school playground, sent with the words, "Last chance," had pushed Ava past fear into a cold, focused fury. Derek Larson was behind this. She was sure of it, and with Michael Reed's help, she was ready to bring him down. The evidence tying Derek to Victor Kane and Eclipse Holdings was mounting, but Ava knew they were running out of time. She met Michael at a discreet coffee shop on the north side, far from the courthouse's prying eyes. The place was quiet, the air thick with the scent of espresso and rain. Michael sat across from her, his expression grim, as he reviewed the photos and recordings from her investigator. He said, "This is enough to get the DA's attention," his voice low. But Derek's not going to go quietly. He's got Kane's muscle behind him, and they're desperate. Ava nodded, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug. "I know, but we can't wait. They're targeting Lila. I need this to end." Michael's eyes softened, and he reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. "It will. I've got my team on Lila and your mother. They're safe, Ava. And I'm not letting anything happen to you." The words stirred something in her, a warmth she hadn't expected. Michael's protectiveness and willingness to stand by her despite her betrayal shifted how she saw him, but there was no time to dwell on it. "What's our next move?" she asked. "Michael said we take this to my contact at the DA's office. They're already building a case against Kane. Your evidence ties Derek to him directly. If we move fast, we can get them both before they realize we're coming." Ava agreed, and they spent the next hour finalizing their plan. She'd hand over the dossier to Michael's contact while he used his legal connections to ensure it reached the right hands. But as they left the coffee shop, Ava's phone buzzed with a new message. "You didn't listen. Say goodbye." Attached was a live video feed, a grainy image of Lila asleep in her grandmother's apartment. Ava's heart stopped. "Michael," she whispered, her voice shaking as she showed him the screen. "They're in her apartment." Michael's face hardened, and he grabbed his phone, dialing his security team. "Tom, get to Ava's mother's place now. Someone's inside." He turned to Ava, his voice urgent. "Where's Lila staying? We need to move." Ava gave him the address, her mind racing as they sped across the city. Michael's security team was closer, and Tom called back within minutes, confirming they'd reached the apartment. "It's a setup," Tom said. "No one's here, but they left a camera. Looks like a scare tactic." Ava's relief was fleeting. Derek was toying with her, using Lila to break her. Michael pulled her into his car, his voice steady despite the chaos. "They're trying to rattle you, Ava. Don't let them. We're going to end this." They drove to the DA's office where Michael's contact, a prosecutor named Elena Carter, was waiting. Ava handed over the dossier, her hands trembling as she explained the threats, the evidence, and Derek's role. Elena's eyes widened as she flipped through the documents. "This is big," she said. "We've been after Kane for years. If Larson's working with him, we can take them both down. But we need to move carefully. He's got eyes everywhere." As they left the DA's office, Ava felt a flicker of hope, but it was short-lived. Her investigator called with urgent news. Derek had been spotted at a warehouse on the west side, meeting with Kane and several armed men. "They're planning something," the investigator said, "and it's happening tonight." Michael's jaw tightened. "We can't wait for the DA. If Derek's moving now, he's either running or striking. We need to stop him." Ava's heart pounded, but she nodded. "I'm coming with you." Michael hesitated, his eyes searching hers. "It's dangerous, Ava. Let me handle this." "No," she said, her voice firm. "This is my fight too. They threatened my daughter. I'm not sitting this out." Reluctantly, Michael agreed, and they drove to the warehouse, his security team trailing behind. The building was a hulking shadow in an abandoned industrial park, its windows dark, the air thick with the smell of oil and rust. Michael's team scouted the perimeter, confirming Derek and Kane were inside with a small crew. Ava's pulse raced as they slipped through a side entrance, the darkness swallowing them. Inside the warehouse was a maze of crates and machinery, the air heavy with tension. Ava and Michael moved silently, guided by Tom's hushed directions through an earpiece. They reached a clearing where Derek stood with Kane, their voices low but heated. "Brooks is a problem," Derek was saying. "She's got too much. We need to end this now." Kane nodded, his hand resting on a gun at his hip. "The kid's the leverage. Take her, and Brooks shuts up for good." Ava's blood ran cold, but before she could react, Michael grabbed her arm, pulling her back. His eyes were fierce, his voice a whisper. "Stay here. I'm going in." Before she could protest, he stepped into the clearing, his presence commanding even in the dim light. "Derek," he called, his voice echoing. "It's over. The DA has everything. Your deals, your ties to Kane, all of it." Derek's face twisted with rage, but Kane moved faster, drawing his gun. Ava's heart stopped, but Michael was ready. He lunged, disarming Kane with a swift move that spoke of training beyond the courtroom. Tom and his team burst in, subduing Kane's men as Michael pinned Derek against a crate. "You thought you could use her to take me down," Michael growled. "You're done, Derek." Ava stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. "You threatened my daughter. You're not walking away from this." Derek's sneer faltered as Tom's team cuffed him, the warehouse filling with sirens as the DA's task force arrived. Ava's legs trembled, but Michael was at her side, his hand steady on her shoulder. "It's over," he said softly. "Lila's safe." As they entered the night, the weight of the past weeks lifted, but Ava knew the fight wasn't over. Derek's arrest was a victory, but Kane's network was still out there, and the truth about Pinnacle was far from fully exposed. Still, with Michael by her side, Ava felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. And as their eyes met in the glow of the city lights, she realized she wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore. She was fighting for something more. The Cook County Courthouse loomed like a fortress, under a sky bruised with clouds, its stone facade a silent witness to the drama unfolding within. Ava Brooks stood at the base of the steps, her heart pounding, as she prepared for the most critical day of the Pinnacle Properties trial. The past weeks had descended into a world of deception, threats, and betrayal. But the warehouse confrontation had changed everything. Derek Larson, exposed as the architect of a scheme to frame Michael Reed, was now in custody, and Victor Kane's criminal network was under scrutiny. Today, Ava and Michael would face the courtroom together, not as adversaries, but as allies determined to unravel the truth. The trial became a spectacle, drawing reporters, activists, and onlookers across Chicago. Ava's article accusing Michael of fraud had sparked outrage, but her subsequent retraction, published with a full admission of her mistake, had shifted the narrative. The public now saw her as a journalist who'd been manipulated, and her willingness to own her error had earned her a grudging respect. But the stakes were higher than ever. Derek's arrest had given the prosecution new leverage, and today's session promised to be a turning point. Inside the courtroom, buzzed with anticipation, Ava sat in the gallery, her notepad ready, eyes scanning the room. Michael stood at the defense table, his navy suit impeccable, his presence commanding despite the weight of the past weeks. He'd been cleared of the fraud allegations, but Pinnacle Properties was still on trial, and Michael was fighting to salvage his client's reputation while exposing Derek's role in the conspiracy. The judge called the court to order, and the prosecution began with a new witness, a former Pinnacle accountant who'd worked under Derek's influence. The accountant's testimony was damning, detailing how Derek had orchestrated fake transactions through Eclipse Holdings to siphon funds and frame Michael. Ava scribbled furiously, her heart racing, as her investigation pieces fell into place. But the real test was yet to come. She'd been called as a witness, a decision she'd made after consulting with Michael and the DA. When her name was called, Ava rose, her steps steady, despite the eyes boring into her. She took the stand, swearing the oath with a calm she didn't feel. The prosecutor, Elena Carter, approached, her expression professional but warm. "Ms. Brooks," she began, "can you tell the court about your investigation into Pinnacle Properties and how you came to publish your article?" Ava took a deep breath, her voice clear as she recounted the story. The anonymous USB drive, Derek's documents, her initial belief in Michael's guilt. She didn't shy away from her mistakes. Her words were raw and honest. "I was misled," she said, her eyes flickering to Michael. Derek Larson provided fabricated evidence to make it look like Michael Reed was behind Pinnacle's financial schemes. "I published the article without fully verifying the documents and regret the harm it caused." The courtroom was silent, her admission weight hanging in the air. Elena nodded, then handed Ava a folder. "Can you confirm these are the documents you received from Mr. Larson?" Ava opened the folder and recognized the forged emails and memos. "Yes," she said. "These are the ones he gave me. But I later discovered they were falsified, designed to implicate Mr. Reed while hiding Mr. Larson's involvement with Eclipse Holdings and Victor Kane." The defense attorney, one of Michael's colleagues, cross-examined her gently, focusing on her journalistic process. Ava answered with precision, her credibility bolstered by her transparency. When she stepped down, she felt a mix of relief and dread. She'd done the right thing, but the spotlight was unforgiving. Michael was next called to testify about his role with Pinnacle and his history with Derek. He took the stand with the same commanding presence he brought to every argument, but Ava saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. His testimony was a masterclass in clarity and conviction. He details how Derek tried to pull him into a shady deal years ago, how their partnership had crumbled, and how Derek had used Ava to exact revenge. Michael said Ms. Brooks was a pawn in Larson's game, his voice steady but laced with emotion. He exploited her commitment to the truth, knowing she'd follow his planted evidence. "But she's not the villain here, Larson is, and he's been working with Victor Kane to manipulate Pinnacle's finances for his own gain." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, and the judge banged the gavel for order. Michael's words were a turning point, shifting the narrative from Pinnacle's alleged crimes to Derek's orchestrated betrayal. Ava watched, her chest tight with admiration and guilt. Michael was fighting for himself and for her, and it stirred something deep within her. The prosecution called one final witness, a tech expert who'd analyzed the forged documents. The expert confirmed they'd been altered to include Michael's name with metadata, pointing to a computer linked to Derek. The evidence was irrefutable, and as Elena delivered her closing argument, Ava felt the tide turn. Sitting in the gallery under guard, Derek looked smaller, his smug demeanor gone. Kane's name loomed large, but he was absent, his own trial pending. As the session ended, the judge announced a recess until the following week when a verdict would be delivered. Ava lingered in the courtroom, her eyes meeting Michael's. He approached, his expression softer than she'd ever seen. "You did well up there," he said quietly. "It took guts to admit you were wrong." Ava swallowed, her voice low. "I had to. I couldn't let Derek win. But I'm still sorry, Michael, for everything." He nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "We're past that now. We're in this together." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning, Ava felt a spark, a connection that went beyond the case. But the weight of the threats against Lila kept her grounded. Derek was down, but Kane's network was still out there, and Ava knew the danger wasn't over. As she left the courthouse, her phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "Nice try, Ms. Brooks. But this isn't over." Her heart sank, but with Michael by her side, she felt a resolve she hadn't known. They'd won a battle, but the war was far from over. The Chicago morning was crisp, the air carrying the first hints of winter as Ava Brooks walked through Lincoln Park, her daughter Lila's small hand tucked into hers, and the past weeks had been a crucible testing Ava's strength, courage, and heart. The Pinnacle Properties trial had ended in a stunning verdict. The company was cleared of the most serious charges, thanks to Michael Reed's brilliant defense and Ava's testimony exposing Derek Larson's deception. Derek was awaiting trial for fraud and conspiracy, and Victor Kane's criminal network was unraveling under the DA's relentless pursuit. Ava felt the weight of fear lifting for the first time in months, replaced by a tentative hope. The park was color-living, the trees ablaze with autumn reds and golds. Lila skipped ahead, chasing a leaf that danced in the wind, her laughter a balm to Ava's soul. Beside her walked Michael, his presence steady and grounding. Their partnership, forged in the chaos of the trial, had grown into something more, a bond built on trust, respect, and an unspoken promise. Ava glanced at him, his navy coat open to the breeze, his eyes soft as he watched Lila play. The man who'd once seemed cold and untouchable was now a part of her life, and she was still adjusting to the shift. The trial's aftermath had been a whirlwind. Ava's retraction article and her testimony had restored much of her credibility, though some readers still viewed her with skepticism. The Chicago Chronicle had stood by her, and her editor, Carla, was already pushing for a follow-up series on Kane's network. But Ava was taking it slow, prioritizing Lila and her own healing. The threats had stopped after Derek's arrest, and Michael's security team had confirmed no further activity from Kane's crew. Still, Ava remained vigilant, her new security system a constant reminder of their danger. Michael had emerged from the trial with his reputation intact, even strengthened. His defense of Pinnacle showcased his skill, and his role in exposing Derek earned him respect across the city. But his quiet support for Ava, his protection of her, and Lila, his willingness to forgive her mistake, had changed her view of him. He wasn't just a brilliant lawyer. He was a man who'd faced his own losses and chose to stand by her when it mattered most. They stopped by a bench, and Lila ran to a nearby playground as Ava and Michael sat. The silence between them was comfortable, starkly contrasting the tension of their early encounters. "Have you ever thought about getting out of this city?" Michael asked, his voice light but curious. "Starting fresh somewhere quieter?" Ava smiled, watching Lila climb a slide. "Sometimes. But Chicago's home. It's messy, complicated, but it's ours. Besides, I'm not done fighting for it." Michael nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You should say that. You're not one to run." She glanced at him, her heart warming at the understanding in his eyes. "What about you? After all this, you could take your pick of cases anywhere. Why stay?" He looked out at the park, his expression thoughtful. "Because of people like you," he said quietly. "People who remind me why I do this. You fought for the truth, Ava, even when it cost you. That's worth staying for." The words hit her deeper than she expected, and she felt a flush of emotion. Their hands brushed on the bench, and neither pulled away. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a promise, a new beginning after the darkness they'd faced. Lila ran back, her cheeks flushed with excitement, and grabbed Michael's hand, pulling him toward the swings. "Push me," she demanded, her laughter infectious. Michael obliged, his laughter joining hers, as he pushed the swing higher. Ava watched, her heart full. This was what she'd fought for. Not just the truth, but moments like this, where Lila could be a child, safe and happy. Michael caught her eye, and the warmth in his gaze told her he understood. Later, as they walked back through the park, Lila held both hands between them. Ava felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The shadows of Chicago Derek's betrayal, Kane's threats, the weight of her own mistakes had nearly broken her. But they'd also led her here to this moment. Michael wasn't just a partner in the fight. He was someone she could imagine building a future with, a family for Lila, a light after the darkness. They stopped at a cafe, where Lila chattered about her school project as they sipped hot chocolate. Michael listened intently, asking questions that made Lila beam. Ava watched, her heart swelling with gratitude. The city still had its shadows, and Ava knew she'd face them again. Her work as a journalist guaranteed it. But with Michael by her side, and Lila's laughter filling the air, she felt ready for whatever came next. Ava took Michael's hand as the sun dipped below the skyline, casting a golden glow over the park, her fingers intertwining with his. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." He squeezed her hand, his eyes steady. "We're just getting started." And as they walked into the evening, Lila skipping ahead, Ava knew he was right. The shadows were behind them, and ahead lay a future bright with possibility, a family forged in the heart of Chicago, strong enough to face any storm.